Vaccination is the most important thing we can do to protect ourselves and our children against ill health. According to the CDC, vaccines prevent up to 3 million deaths worldwide every year. There are many sources of data available on this topic, of course, but ultimately, this is a personal decision. So we just want to share the facts with you and help you make the decision that makes you feel the most comfortable. In helping us do that, we asked the Top Line MD Alliance affiliated primary care physician to provide some insight. Thank you, Dr. Sukenik, for giving us your time and your knowledge on this.
Thank you.
So before we get into the specifics of which vaccines are recommended, can you explain the history of vaccines and why physicians say they're so important?
So the history of vaccines are very interesting. They date back to the 15th century. The Chinese were the first to recognize that when people back then were dying of smallpox in droves, that the ones who didn't die never got smallpox again. So what they did is they actually took the smallpox lesions from people who survived, scraped it off their body, dried them out, and actually inhaled the dust, and noticed that the people who inhaled the dust never got smallpox. And that was the first sign of the vaccine. After that, it took a couple of years to the 17th century, and Dr. Edward Jenner, who is probably the father of vaccinology, is what they call it, was the first one to discover the actual smallpox vaccine. He did the same thing. He took the lesions off of someone who had smallpox, injected them into someone else, and that person did not get smallpox. And that's how this all started. Looking at our immune system and how we can use it to fight these infections. We move on, and we've had the measles, the mumps vaccine, the rubella vaccine, hepatitis B, chickenpox, and we have so many vaccines now that all work with our own immune system to avoid us from getting these infections and to fight them off before they get fully into our body.
So now you just mentioned our immune system. How does this immunity work in terms of what exactly are vaccines that we get injected with?
You know, to understand vaccinations, you have to understand our immune system, because that's really what it is. The vaccine is training our cells in our immune system to recognize disease and to fight it before it infects us completely and gets us sick. When you think about your immune system, you think about your white blood cells, and your white blood cells are made up of a lot of different versions, but the most important ones to fight infection are going to be macrophages, T cells, and B cells. All of these work together to figure out what the infection is and to figure out how to fight it. So vaccines will help protect us against this by imitating the infection. That's what we're looking to do in the human body. We're looking to create an imitation. We don't want you to get fully infected, but we want your body to recognize when the infection occurs. The vaccine will train our immune system to fight against that virus.
Awesome. So what would happen if we stopped vaccinating adults and children?
So in the medical community, we know that would be devastating. These infections would come back, infections that most people in our lifetime have never seen. Measles, mumps, rubella, all of these infections would come back in droves. Our kids would get infected, would get very sick. So vaccines play a very, very important part in avoiding these viruses. Smallpox is the first virus to be completely eradicated, so we don't get smallpox vaccines anymore because the vaccine works so well. In 1976, it was stopped, and so we don't do that anymore because we don't have to worry about it. And that's what we're hoping these other vaccines will do eventually as well, eradicate these infections so we don't see them at all.
So lately there has been confusions or misunderstandings about vaccines, but we know vaccinations are an important part of family and public health. However, a common question many have is the amount of vaccines received during a specific time. Can too many vaccines wear out a person's immune system, Dr. Sukenik?
No, it's very unlikely that it'll wear out a normal healthy person will wear out your immune system, because each vaccine works for a different, remember, each vaccine is it will work for a different virus or a different infection. So, and each one will turn on a different mechanism in your system. So it's very unlikely that too many vaccines will wear out your immune system.
And can vaccines cause severe side effects that lead to infections or illnesses or anything like that?
You can have side effects because remember, what we're trying to do is imitate an infection so that your body can understand how to fight it when it's real. So you can have symptoms, fevers, body aches, injection site pain where you get injected. You can have those. Those are normal side effects to vaccinations, and they should last a very short period of time, but that's a sign that the vaccine is doing something to your immune system. It's starting it up, which is a good sign.
And many believe better hygiene and sanitation is actually responsible for decreased infections and sicknesses, not vaccines. Is that true?
No, better hygiene and sanitation is extremely important, and it definitely decreases our risk of infection. But once you're infected, you're infected. Better hygiene won't help that anymore, or sanitation won't help that. So once you get the infection, the question is, how do you fight the infection? And the way we fight infections is through our immune system. And so our immune system needs to be trained to understand the infection, to recognize it, and then to destroy it. And that's really what we're doing with vaccines. So vaccines are there to prevent you from getting sick once you're infected. Sanitation and good hygiene will avoid the infection, but it won't stop you from getting infected.
And is there anyone who shouldn't or can't get any type of vaccines?
Yeah, there are many people out there that have weakened immune systems, whether it's through chemotherapy, through autoimmune disorders, and those should not get vaccines because they don't work. They aren't going to work for you. And so we have to look at other ways to avoid infection in those patients.
And let's end with the most important question of them all. Which vaccines are recommended for most adults?
So for most adults, if you were born in the United States and you went to high school in the United States, you got most of your vaccines. And so there's not a lot that you need to do as an adult. As a child, you need to get measles, mumps, rubella, pertussis, tetanus. There's a whole bunch of vaccines out there, hepatitis B before high school, hepatitis A if you're traveling. But most adults should get a flu shot every year because the flu virus mutates. And when it changes, you need to get the vaccine for that mutation. Obviously, COVID, which is the newest one, as it mutates, we may need a better vaccine for the mutated forms that are occurring. But for right now, the COVID vaccines work very well against COVID. If you haven't had hepatitis B vaccine in 20 years, you should go to your primary care doctor and get tested to see if you still have immunity to it. If you work in the healthcare field, or you work around blood products, you probably should get a booster for hepatitis B vaccine. The pneumonia vaccine is really important, and that guards against bacterial pneumonia for people over the age of 65. Everyone should get that. The shingles vaccine, of course, for everyone over the age of 50. If you're worried about getting shingles, it's a good vaccine to have on board. Depending on your travel history, there are other vaccines out there. If you're traveling to a region that has very high in hepatitis B, very high in yellow fever, very high in various different viruses, it's worth it to get those vaccines. Malaria is another one. It's worth it to get those vaccines.
And is there anything else you want to add, Dr. Sukenik, about vaccination and the importance?
I think vaccinations are the standard of care in our day and age. You need to understand the importance of vaccination really deals with our immune system. And I really believe our immune system, the human immune system, can take care of almost any disease that it gets thrown its way. But it needs help in training the immune system to take care of that disease so that we avoid the infections and we avoid getting sick, and of course avoid death and problems that go along with that. So I really believe vaccinations are an important part in any sort of healthcare system, and to avoid mass infections, but also to avoid infections in general. So,
thank you so much for all of this valuable information, Dr. Sukenik.
You're welcome.
We have more resources on our website, toplinemd.com, for you to learn about the importance of vaccines. Plus, if you don't have a primary care physician, all of the affiliated doctors' information can also be found on that page.